US Weekly Roundup powered by PSG Group of Companies in Life and Health.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr.Rose Vadakara and welcome to Life and Health. In today's segment, we are going to discuss about clinical trials. As you all know that clinical trial has been the cornerstone for modern medicine development. It is now my pleasure to welcome Dr.Chadi Nabhan, who is an inspirational, innovative, transformational leader who has been working as a hematology-oncology physician for past 20 years. He currently holds the senior leadership position and also the senior vice president and chairman for Precision Oncology Alliance at Caris Life. He is also the writer, book author, transformational leader, and also a clinical researcher. And it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Chadi Nabhan to Life and Health. Doctor, welcome.
Rose, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to our conversation. Appreciate the invite.
So, Doctor, what is clinical trials and how does it benefit our patients?
Look, clinical trials, basically, you are asking a question about an experimental therapy, about a new drug, about a new intervention, and you're trying to understand whether this new therapy, the new intervention, is going to add additional benefit to the patients affected with a particular disease. There are many types of clinical trials, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but ultimately, clinical trials are asking a question in medicine, and we're trying to get an answer. The hope is that this answer is going to benefit larger proportion of patients affected with a particular disease or entity.
So you did mention about there's different types of clinical trials. Can you explain those?
Sure. So, for example, when we talk about phase 1 clinical trials, in general, these are dose-finding studies. In other words, there's enough information. There are enough information in preclinical studies, in cellular studies, in animal studies, to suggest that maybe we could take this particular drug or intervention into humans. But phase 1 trials are asking the question, what is the best dose to study this particular drug in this particular patient population?
Okay.
And, there are different ways to conduct this, but that's really the purpose of the phase 1 study. So essentially, we don't know if the drug is going to benefit, but we're really asking what is the proper dose. And by the way, there has been some studies to demonstrate that even in phase 1, patients do benefit from these studies. Then you have phase 2 studies. Phase 2 studies, you're trying to understand the efficacy. Is the drug active in this particular patient population, in this particular disease entity? Usually the phase 2 study could have tens of patients enrolled, could be 50, could be 60, could be 100, but that's the purpose of the phase 2 study, to demonstrate the efficacy and to know about toxicity. Then you move into phase 3 studies. These are larger studies. Sometimes they could be randomized control studies, so you're comparing one regimen to another regimen. And the question in a phase 3 study is, am I able to demonstrate that this new therapy that I have shown to be effective in phase 2 could replace the current standard? So let's say the patient population has been taking drug A for this particular disease forever. And now there's drug B, that's a new drug coming in with a promise that it could be better than drug A. The only way to know that is by comparing drug B to drug A in a large phase 3 study.
Okay.
And the last one is phase 4, which is that happens afterwards. We call this is post-marketing or post-approval. And when the drug becomes available and is studied and it's out there, phase 4 is attempting to investigate what happens in a larger patient population, in thousands and thousands of people who may take this drug. And the only way to know that is by studying that in the patients that receive that after the approval by the regulatory authorities.
Okay. So as a clinical researcher, what are some of the questions that you will be asking the patients when they come for this study?
Yeah, so, any clinical trial has what we call inclusion and exclusion criteria. What that means is that there are particular specifications that patients must meet in order for them to be included in the clinical trial. So we have these clinical trials, and we usually go through the process of, does the patient meet the inclusion criteria to allow that individual to be part of the study, and are we sure that there are none of the exclusion criteria that are there? I mean, just an example. Let's say a clinical trial asking whatever question, but in order for the patient to be enrolled, they must have a kidney function of X, Y, and Z. So I need to check the kidney function of that patient to make sure it meets that specification, because if it's out of limit, then I cannot put the patient on the trial. So I think looking at the inclusion-exclusion criteria is critical. But Rose, I tell you, one of the most important parts, in my opinion, is to know the patient, is to know what are the goals of that patient. What do they really want? What is their philosophy about life? Is the clinical trial, which is experimental, we don't know sometimes if it works or not, is that aligned with the values of that patient? That is very critical. Every patient is different. I endorse clinical trials. As you said in your introduction, it has been the cornerstone of how we improve modern medicine. But it may not be for everybody, and that's okay. So I get to know my patient, understand the patient values, and explain all of these. This is very critical. And lastly, I would say it's very important to explain the goal of the trial. Remember what we said, phase 1 trial is a dose-finding study. I cannot look a patient in the eye and say, this study is going to help you. Now, I should say, I don't know. I hope it will. And I think framing this is very critical so that me and the patient and the medical team, we all have realistic expectations of what we're trying to accomplish.
So being an experienced researcher, what are some of the questions that you will be recommending for our viewers who wanted to be on the trial? What are some of the questions that you want them to ask for them when they enroll for the clinical trial?
I think one of the most important questions that a patient should ask a physician when they are seeing them, are there clinical trials that are asking questions relevant to my disease? That's the first question. And I think if the answer is yes, let's understand that clinical trial. But look, at the end of the day, it is important to know what is the trial trying to ask, and if there's a drug involved in the trial, ask questions. What do we know about the side effect of that drug? It is in a clinical trial now, but previous trials, what did they show? Ask the physician, what's your experience with other patients that have been enrolled on that clinical trial? Because the physician will tell you, I've had 10 patients on this trial and this is what I have observed. I think that information might be helpful. Ask about the logistics. How many times do I need to come to the office? How many times do I need to get a blood draw? How many biopsies do I need? The logistics are important. If you need to go every week and it's far away, it may not be for you. This is important. Ask about how often do I need to get imaging studies, CAT scans, MRIs. Then ask about cost. It is appropriate for you to understand what are the costs of you being involved. In other words, if I'm in the clinical trial, is the trial going to pay for my scans and imaging? Is the trial going to pay for whatever it is, transportation? I think that's important. Some trials do actually have funds included with that. And then lastly, ask about when do I expect to know whether I benefited or not? When is my first assessment, second assessment? And I'll finish with another one. What happens if that doesn't work? Is there a plan B? What do you have down the pike? So I need to know what are my options. All of these are important questions, and always remember, there is no question that you are not allowed to ask. You are the patient, and you must be empowered in asking any question that you really want. Your medical team's job is to answer these questions to you succinctly in a very easy to understand manner and to be available to you anytime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chadi. This is very informative. I hope all our viewers really help from this talk. And thank you so much for joining with us today in Life and Health.
Really appreciate, and I look forward to seeing you again.
US Weekly Roundup powered by PSG Group of Companies in ഈ എപ്പിസോഡ് ഇവിടെ പൂർത്തിയാകുന്നു. നിങ്ങളുടെ അഭിപ്രായങ്ങളും നിർദ്ദേശങ്ങളും ദയവായി asianetUSnews@gmail.com എന്ന ഇമെയിലിലൂടെയോ 7324299529 എന്ന വാട്സ്ആപ്പ് നമ്പറിലൂടെയോ ഞങ്ങളെ അറിയിക്കുക. മറ്റൊരു വൈവിധ്യമാർന്ന എപ്പിസോഡുമായി വീണ്ടും കാണാം അടുത്ത ആഴ്ച. നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം.
Griffey's Law Firm, Chicago. Trusted name for work injuries and personal injury cases, wrongful death cases and much more. Ensuring aggressive financial results. Attorney Stephen Griffey's. Serious lawyer for serious cases. We want a long-term relationship with you. Call us 312-855-0511. Griffey's Law Firm Limited. www.griffeyslaw.com.